What's up, everybody? It's Goddess Z, and I'm here with another podcast episode on Holistic and Spiritual AF. Welcome, welcome, welcome. If you are coming back to this channel, I appreciate you so much. And if you're new to this channel, be sure to hit that subscribe, that like, that follow, depending on where you're listening. We talk about all sorts of things as it pertains to the mind, body, spirit integration, because I always say if either one of those things are out of balance, then we are out of balance. And we don't want that. Okay. So if that's what you're into, make sure you follow, like, subscribe, definitely comment. I also appreciate that as well. And this podcast can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, pretty much anywhere that podcasts are aired. Okay. And we drop these first and third Friday of the month at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then, of course, I pop in like today to do these podcast solo episodes as well when spirit moves me, when I have these downloads and transmissions to offer you guys. So you don't want to miss that. Like I said, be sure to check me out at holisticandspiritualaf.com to stay up to date with everything that's going on as far as podcasts, classes, books, where to find me on social media, and all of that good jazz. Okay. All right. So I'm not going to take up too much time. It has been a while since I've come in and done a podcast episode solo for you guys, but Spirit was just moving me in that direction. And I wanted to kind of chop it up with y'all about what it means to live as a sovereign being, okay, to really embody that. I think we hear a lot of that on social media now. It's amazing how when a term or a trend starts, like people just start throwing it out there, right? And they just start regurgitating each other's whatever everybody is saying. And then they don't really break it down like what that actually means. And the next thing you know, people are like, yeah, I'm sovereign, which is great if you are. But if you're not and you're trying to figure out what the heck they're talking about or how do I get from point A to Z, you're definitely on the right podcast episode. Okay. So that's a lot of the work that I do, a lot of the classes that I do are to help people to be that bridge, between where you are now to where it is that you want to go. I'm heavily connected to my ancestors and my spirit guides, so I do a lot of teaching and helping people to reconnect to their ancestors because I'm a firm believer that their ancestors are going to be the ones to kind of guide you on your journey and your path so that you are moving in alignment with your purpose as well as doing things that actually apply to you. We're all unique individual spirits and souls having a human experience. We come from different lineages, we come from different cosmic families. And so I'm a true believer that it's very important to connect with your own ancestors. Okay. You're going to be able to get guidance from other people out there on social media and in the different respective places that you're being drawn and led to. But my goal is to always help you to be a sovereign being, to embody, whatever practices that are necessary for you so that you can go out there and start to practice, to teach, to heal, whatever it is that's in alignment with your soul, your DNA, and your purpose. Okay. So that's how I roll. Simple as that. So I never like have any little I'm not a guru. I don't have these little puppets following me everywhere. I have people who are interested. They ask questions. I send them off to go do the work. And most of the time I'm connecting them with their ancestors. Okay. So a little bit about me if you're just jumping on this podcast and you've never heard my story. I have guests on here usually. So I usually don't I haven't talked about myself in a while. Myself is I've been on the journey for 21 years now. Oh my gosh, my entire adult life I have been in some sort of spiritual practice, spiritual experience, spiritual teachings, and I have gone on to help other people with that. I talk about my story a lot, being coming from a really religious household and background where we weren't talking about any of this stuff. It was just kind of like the Jesus Christ story, like a lot of people can probably relate to. But then later on, as I started to get into my beginning of my adult life, I had accumulated quite a bit of trauma that I had experienced in my life. And so I started to seek other ways to begin to heal. And that took me on a journey from meditation to like yoga to crystals. And the journey went on until about 11 years ago when I tapped into traditional African spirituality. I really started to find out about myself as an Afro Indigenous woman. And that really opened up things for me. I started to have a conscious connection with my ancestors, although my ancestors had always been there with me, guiding me, talking to me since I was a little girl. I just, because I had no knowledge of that and no teachings of that, I didn't know what the heck that was. I just knew that we were really close. So it was really nice to be able to consciously connect with them about 11 years into the journey, and really start working with them on a whole different level, and really start seeing how that they were guiding me in my journey. Okay. So they've been with me the whole time. That's all I can say. They've gotten me through so many different things, and I've practiced so many different things, taken classes, been initiated, and now I embody this and I help other people who are seekers on the journey, and they're looking for, where to start, how to start, what to do. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. You can find out more information about me, like I said, down in the description as well. And with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and jump into today's topic. Okay. So I've got my nifty little notes here from my downloads and stuff like that. And I want to make sure that I'm staying on topic because I get to flowing, channeling, and we be all over the place, and that people don't necessarily go where I go. Okay. So, first things first, I want to actually define what it means to be sovereign, because we hear that a lot. Sovereign is basically a word, like I said, that gets thrown around a lot in spiritual spaces, but it's really rooted in something deeper. It's something that's ancestral. It's something that's embodied, which means that you live it, you become it, you are it. And to be sovereign means to no longer live your life on autopilot. Okay, basically not living your life on autopilot, reacting from trauma, cultural programming, or fear. Okay, it means you choose your life with intention, how you move, how you love, how you speak, and how you protect your energy. Sovereignty is self ownership, it's soul alignment, and it's when your decisions flow from your truth, not from guilt, obligation, or survival mode. Okay, so quite naturally, that probably sounds like something you want to get into, something you want to do, but it's loaded, and it's a lot. And I think a lot of times people will probably think that, well, I'm doing that already. I know who I am. I this, I that, and I would have said the same thing actually about, 2, 3 years ago. But the bottom line is I still had some programming that was inside of me, and I was acting certain ways based on that programming, based on fear, based on past trauma, based on validation. That was a big one, big one, big one for me, based on what other people think about me. And there's a lot of different things that can kind of affect that for us. Okay. So it could be, let's go all the way back to our families as usual, how we were raised, what types of teachings that were taught, if we went to church, if we didn't go to church, how we were judged by our peers in school. Ooh, school is the worst. Like, is it really teaching going on in there and learning, or is it really socialization and making people feel worse? I know some people's school experience was horrible, and I would say that was my case as well because of the emotional trauma that I experienced for a variety of different reasons. Never really fitting in, never really being picked first, very quiet and seen as different. And because I wasn't a part of the group, which I later on found out was actually a good thing, I was sometimes overlooked, or, whatever the experience is for you. So a lot of that programming stayed inside of me, okay? And a lot of other people can definitely agree. And we end up creating these behaviors and habits as survival skills and mechanisms to kind of just get through the life. You know what I'm saying? So, with that being said, there's a lot of that has to be unprogrammed in order for us to get to a place where not only do we have knowledge of self, but we're comfortable in our own skin. We have boundaries. We know how to say no. We know who to have around us. We know who to stay away from. We know how to govern ourselves with authority in this spirit realm. So we're no longer being swayed here or there, doing what somebody else wants us to do, or what we think somebody else wants us to do, or what we should do, or what they say you should do. It's you are setting intention for your life. You are living, moving, breathing, thinking, acting in that manner. And in order to do that, there's also spiritual maintenance that must is necessary in order to keep us there. So if you are there, there's a spiritual maintenance aspect of it also as well. So hopefully that gives a good breakdown of what it means to be sovereign and like how a person needs to become soul aligned. Okay. So basically, when we're saying I'm sovereign, we're talking about somebody who knows themselves, and like I said, 2 or 3 years ago, I would have told you that was me, but I didn't even realize that I still had some things, some shadow work that I had to go through in order for me to really kind of settle and embody into this soul, that is awake all the time. It's more than just conscious sometimes and hearing this and knowing about that. It literally took some years for me to constantly be everywhere that I go, whether I'm in the grocery store, whether I'm at work, whether I'm here on the podcast episode, if I'm in the car listening to music. I am the goddess of my life. And so that took some time. That took some time. It's more than just knowing yourself, it's really knowing yourself. Okay. So let's say today I want to talk about 5 powerful ways that you can begin to live as a sovereign being. Okay. So we're going to be talking about things that are rooted in divine feminine energy, ancestral healing. And of course, we're going to be talking about healing on a grander scale, as well as some psychosomatic things as well. So I want to go into the first thing that we're talking about here, which is coming home to your body. Okay. Your body is an altar. I've actually got a podcast episode with a guest of mine here talking about that. And she really breaks down the body and how that's connected to our spiritual selves as well and our emotional selves as well. So check that out. But yeah, we want to come home to the body. Now, this is very simple. And I'm starting here because everybody can do this. None of this stuff is going to be like super hard. Okay. None of this stuff is going to be something like, oh, I'm not that far along. Like I said, I am usually the things that I teach are a bridge from someone who's starting at beginner, someone who's in the middle, someone who's advanced, maybe somebody who needs to kind of have a refresher and wake up again. That's what I'm teaching. So nothing that I'm teaching is going to be like just outside of anything that you can do or is too advanced for you to do. So we're talking about coming home to the body first. And we're going to hit on 2 different points here. We're going to hit on the emotional mastery, and we're also going to hit on discernment. Okay. So, emotional mastery is going to be being able to control your emotions. Like, that's big right there. So, like, a lot of times people will say they're sovereign, but can you control your emotions? Or are you so easily swayed by things that happen to you? Are you still in the state of mind and living where stuff has happened to you? You're not actually manifesting things, or you're not actually redirecting things, or you're not shifting the energy. You're just mad all the time, or you're getting really excited just to get let down. You have high expectations and high hopes, and then they drop down and you're sad. So there's emotional mastery. That's a big thing. Being able to control your facial expressions. That's something I think a lot of people probably practice at work more than anything, depending on the type of job that you have. But like in other places, not so much. That's something I have to check myself on a lot because my face can tell the story. So that's something that I've worked on and gotten a lot better with. Okay. So emotional mastery, that's going to be like the number one thing you want to start tapping into. And I say come home to your body because your body is going to give you signals of all different types. Okay. It's not just the pain, it's not just the discomfort and the disease, but that is usually signaling to you that something else is going on and there's something that you need to take a look at and pay attention to. So the more that you actually do that, the more that you're going to start to receive different types of messages. And once again, a lot of these things that I talk about are going to kind of overlap and intersect, and they're intentionally designed to do so. So, if you are feeling something that I pay attention to, let me give an example. If I get a feeling about a person, and I may not know this person, I may just have met this person, and I get a pit in my solar plexus. And I'm like, "Ooh," like, I already know that's something like, because my body is letting me know, not only is my body, but an energy center is specifically letting me know. So I can go to my solar plexus and see what's going on with this. This is my survival. This is my willpower. This is, something to do with my ability to get things done and my drive and my motivation. So if I have a pit in my stomach in the solar plexus, then I'm going to be kind of paying attention to this person a little differently and a little more carefully because I want to see what it is that caused this. Okay. So that's a combination of my body signaling to me as well as my intuition saying, hey, pay attention. Look up, look alive, right now you want to pay attention to this person. And sure enough, every single time it never fails me. If I let the person go a little bit and figure out who they are, it's something that they were trying to do. Maybe they were trying to manipulate me. Maybe they wanted me to see things their way. Maybe they were being untruthful. Maybe they had some ulterior motives. Something about that was going to infringe upon my boundaries as a sovereign being and how I live. So I have to pay attention to that. Okay. If I get some sensations down in my root chakra, same thing. I have to think about that. This is my security. This has to do with my ability to live and be grounded on this earth in a certain type of manner. So my body is constantly giving me signals. Something else is ringing in my ears. A lot of times people talk about ringing in their ears. What does that mean? That can mean a lot of different things. It can mean your spirit guides are trying to get access, your attention. It could mean your ancestors are trying to get your attention. It could also mean that your frequency is being updated and changed. Okay, so when you hear that kind of stuff, it's like, pay attention. Like, usually your body is signaling something to you to pay attention. And a lot of times, if you're paying attention, if you're being conscious, intuitive, and aware, the next thing that happens, you're prepared because you were already paying attention to it. Okay. But if you're just somebody who's just moving around like an NPC and you're just programmable, as well, which means that things that are happening around you is affecting you on the inside and on the outside, you're just completely out of control. You're not actually being sovereign in that moment. And so a lot of times your body, and if you if you really think about it, when you start practicing this, you're going to notice you're going to win some of these, and then some of these you're not. You're going to be like, oh my God, my solar plexus was feeling a certain way, or I got this feeling, or my intuition was telling me. Okay. Those are the things that are trying to let you know that, hey, pay attention, become more conscious and aware. I'm going to put my phone on silent, y'all. Okay, so coming back to your body, very simple. And like I said, the more you start doing this, the more signs you're going to notice that start popping up all over the place. Okay, so I wanted to touch on that, and then sitting with your emotions without judgment. So if you're doing this consciously on your own, without actually waiting on something to happen, because say, I want to practice this, I want to know what it feels like, I want to know what the different sensations are, before a certain type of emotion comes up. Just sitting with yourself quietly, and not necessarily in a meditative type of way this time, but just sitting there with your thoughts, okay? Because our thoughts are constantly running and going from the time we open our eyes up in the morning until we close them. So, sitting with yourself and noticing the things that come up in your mind, as well as the types of emotions that they sway you in, okay? And not in a judgmental manner, just sitting with your emotions without judging it, letting them feeling them, but not letting them run you. Okay. So, how many times have we thought about something that was negative? Okay, something that happened to us or a person that we don't like, and then next thing you know, we start going on one inside of our mind, and we start creating these scenarios about what we're going to say and what we're going to do, and all of a sudden your whole entire mood has been shifted off of something that either already happened or hasn't actually happened. Okay, so that's what we mean by not letting the emotions, take you somewhere else that's not even what's happening in the present right now. So very important to try to have some emotional mastery. And so when you think about that from a standpoint of being a sovereign being, that shit ain't easy. Like, let's just keep it a being. That's not that easy. That takes some practice. That takes some work. That takes some quiet time. And we're not even talking about meditation now. There's some times when I do spiritual work and I do root work with my ancestors that I don't say a word, that I'm quiet intentionally, and now that's just something that I do when I'm getting ready to do that work because I know that I can hear. I can hear everything. I'm not going to miss anything, and that doesn't mean that my thoughts are not still popping up in between the conversation and the messages and the downloads. It just means that I don't add any extra chaos and distractions inside of that time. Okay. So it gives me time to practice being quiet. Turn the TV off, turn the radio off, turn your Spotify off, turn your cell phone on silent, and just get quiet. See, like right now, my ears are ringing. always ringing, you know, and that's because I'm getting downloads, channeling, and transmissions. Okay, so I know that for me because I know what it is that I'm doing and what I was called to do right before I hit record on this podcast. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is discernment. Oh my God, discernment has been a real life changer for me as well. Once my ancestors started guiding me into um, being more sovereign and embodying this, really pulling all the way into my divine feminine and my goddess self, I really had to take a look at my discernment. Okay. Um, the fact that I was not having discernment sometimes, I was just doing things really quick because they were attached to some of this programming. They were attached to wanting people to like me. They were attached to want to be a part of something. They were attached to my gotta be doing, but sometimes what it is that I think I need to be doing may not even actually be in alignment with what I need to be doing. It may not be in alignment with my soul's purpose. It may not have anything to do with me. It may not be good or bad. It may just not have anything to do with my soul's purpose, and it's not going to move me further along on my journey in any sort of a way. So this ties into the body as well, because a lot of times, and I know everybody knows this, the body gives you yes and no's. The body gives you yes and no's. Okay. Whether you want to call that intuition or if that's the body, physically representing the intuition, the body tells you yes or no's. Okay. And the best way to describe this is with smells. Okay. Think about smelling candles, like going into a candle store and how we sniff different candles, or perfume store or body spray or whatever it is you wear, and cologne, for the men out there, and you smell this and it smells good, and the body says yes, yes, and then you smell something else or a bad candle and you're like, not that. Okay, so your body's saying no. Your body's like, no, we don't want to smell that. Like, we don't want that, being the aroma inside of the house. And so you listen to that. You don't question that. You don't say, oh, well, I don't know if this is true or if it's not. You just instinctively, intuitively, and innately embody that decision to yes or no. So that's the same thing with discernment in a variety of different things. If somebody comes to you and says, hey, we're going to be doing this and it's going to be this, and that, and you really like, I don't know, like your body is saying, it's not a strong yes. It's not a you should be there. And your body's like, that's not really my vibe. I don't like being out that late, or maybe it's up too early in the morning, or I don't know, like you may not even know that much about it. All you know is that your body is not saying, yeah, go ahead and do it. Your body is letting you know, and then you decide that, well, I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway because maybe it's fear of missing out. Maybe it's you just afraid you're gonna miss something, or really you need to miss something. Or maybe it's just that, well, I don't want them to think that blah blah blah. Okay, and so you end up going and it ends up being a total freaking cluster, and everything just goes wrong that you could possibly think of. And you say to yourself, man, I knew I shouldn't have went. So that's the discernment we're talking about. And being okay with that. That's the thing too. You don't have to be everything to everybody all the time. It could be something that maybe you said yes. Your body said yes to it and was like, we're gonna go. Yeah, that sounds good. I want to do that. But then the day comes along, and then all of a sudden you're not in a good space spiritually. You're feeling like maybe you need to be more internal today. Maybe you need some rest, maybe you need some self-care. You need to take care of yourself. And you really just don't need to be around a lot of people. Maybe you're preparing for the next phase of a spiritual transformation and you need to be quiet, right? Not around a lot of people. So now all of a sudden it's getting closer to time and your body says, no, I don't think we should go. I'm really just not feeling it today. And you say, call the person up, text them, whatever you need to do, and say, hey, you know what, I'm gonna I'm not coming for whatever reason, however you make that sound, without making up a lie, because you're still being true to yourself. I'm not gonna be able to make it. That's complete right there. um so that in itself is using discernment that's in alignment with your soul. If your soul says, hey, we need to rest, we got a major frequency shift coming here, I need you to be not distracted with all the noise of the people and the program today. That's utilizing discernment and your body telling you yes or no, and we just trust it. Don't go against that. If your body's sitting there telling you something, it's attached to you, it's your temple, go ahead and listen to that. All right. So we talked about coming home to the body and how to embody this. We're taking it from as physical as it can possibly be. We talked about emotional mastery. We talked about discernment, listening to your body's yes and no and trusting that. And then, of course, your womb for ladies, 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 my divine feminine, my goddesses, my matriarchs, your womb. And when I talked about my solar plexus, that's that womb area. That's that gut. That's that gut intuition right there. So usually when we're feeling something there, something off. Your intuition is trying to tell you something. And I think most people, whether they have had a lot of practice with intuition, meditation, and spiritual practices, they trust that gut instinct. Or they don't trust it, but they definitely feel it. Okay. So, on a physical level, you can feel in the womb area, the solar plexus area where I talked about that gut area intuition. Okay. So, by the time you can feel it here, your intuition is screaming, like, listen to me, pay attention. Okay. So, that's that gut feeling. That's that body, giving us signals about something that may be for us or not for us. So, next, I want to talk about activating the divine feminine within. Okay. And this divine feminine goes for my sacred masculine as well as my divine feminine. So, it's not just male or female. This is the divine feminine energy that we're talking about. But a lot of us, as women in particular, are us womb holders. We carry ancient feminine codes with inside of us. Okay. So, ladies of the Afro Indigenous diaspora, I cannot urge and stress this to you enough. How magnificent and how powerful you are as a divine feminine, and how precious the codes that we carry are. Okay. We carry the codes of being a nurturer, healer, warrior, sensual creatress. Living sovereignly means honoring all of her. Okay. All of her. Okay. And that's very, very important. I think it's so crucial to talk about that, because we as divine feminine have a lot of times gotten ourselves out of this role, and into a masculine role, and that's not our fault. A lot of it, okay, a lot of it has to do with the patriarchal society that we're living in, and the patriarchal mindset that we're living in, that has pulled us away from our natural essence as divine feminine. Okay. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we have to be both. Okay. And I'm a firm believer in that, because at one point I was a single mother of two kids, and when you like that, you got to be everything. You got to be nurturer, you got to be disciplinarian, you got to be protector, you got to be provider, you got to be all of these different things. Okay. So coming back to that divine feminine and understanding her role in the codes that we carry, is going to be very important. Okay. So, two things I want to talk about to embody this is commitment to your truth and spiritual protection. Now, this is going to be so crucial. Okay. Commitment to your truth, speaking your truth without apology. Say what you mean and mean it sacredly. I love that. And the reason why is because a lot of times this goes back to that program, and think about all the things we say to people and how much of it is actually rooted in our truth. Okay. And like I said, this is male or female on this part here, being committed to your truth. But in order to be committed to your truth, then you have to know what your truth is. Okay. In order to know what your truth is, then you have to start coming back to the body. Okay. So that you can hear, being quiet, listening to your thoughts, connecting with your ancestors, connecting with your spirit guides, taking the time to journal or whatever it is that you do, self care. All of these things are going to pull you outside of the program, and you will start to tap back into the program that was always yours. Okay. And so once you do that, this is how we get into knowledge of self. Now we start understanding who we are, what it is that we like, what's in alignment with our soul, and what's in alignment with our purpose, what our purpose is, receiving messages and downloads more frequently and trusting that, then you can speak with truth. You speak with truth, mean what you say, and say what you mean sacredly. In other words, to speak the truth and honor yourself as a divine feminine is a sacred thing. Okay. So, very, very important there. And then, of course, I want to talk about spiritual protection. Because when we talk about divine feminine, being the nurturer, the central creatress, she's also governing the spiritual realm. And where the sacred masculine comes in is the sacred masculine. When we talk about protector and provider, we have taken this because of a patriarchal society to a physical realm. Okay, so the role of a protector and provider, we think, or most people think, when we're talking about a masculine, is that he's supposed to have a good job, he's supposed to buy us a house, he's supposed to make the most money, and some of these dated ideas that we've heard and a lot of us have grown up with. But in actuality, the sacred masculine's responsibility as the protector and the provider of the divine feminine is to make sure that she is protected so that she can do her thing in the spiritual realm unbothered. Okay. And he provides what it is that she needs. Okay. So, yes, we're talking about material things here to a certain extent, but really what we're talking about is we're talking about the spiritual realm, because everything starts in the spiritual realm first. Okay. So, when sis is up here, doing her root work, or she's saying prayers, or she's reading her Bible in a certain manner, or she's praying over the family, these things actually began to manifest in the physical realm. Okay. So a lot of that is, that's why I said we've gotten so pulled outside of our divine feminine nature that we got to go to work, we got to do this, we got to do that. We barely have time to sit down in sister circles, go on retreats and things, really replenish on a soul and spirit level. And so we're out of whack with that. The man has to go make the money and make sure he's providing physically, but it doesn't leave enough space for her to do what she needs to do on the spiritual realm. So spiritual protection, at this point in time, as divine feminines, is our responsibility. Okay, so we have to make sure that we're protecting our gifts, we're protecting our energy, we're protecting our light, and understanding that not everybody is getting access to this. Ooh, ooh, ooh. I am so excited to talk about this because, like, just even saying that just gives me so much peace, to realize how I can exhale now that I've understood that as a sovereign divine feminine being, because I definitely was given. See, as divine feminines, we have, like I said, been pulled out of this role, and we have been put into being everything for everybody, everywhere. Okay. Being everything for the children, being everything for the husband, being everything for the partner, being everything for the people at the job, overextending ourselves, trying to be everything everywhere. And we deplete our energy, we deplete our light. We're misusing our gifts. Our gifts are being given without being appreciated. They're not being replenished and restored. And we end up being drained. And we're not spiritually protected because we're not doing the things that are supposed to be, that we should be doing, basically governing the spiritual realm. We're doing the best we can, but we're depleted because we're thrown into survival mode. So, as a divine feminine, being able to protect your gifts is like number one. Okay, that's all I can say, is making sure that you're taking time to have those self care times away from everybody, doing what's necessary to replenish your soul and your spirit. Okay. And to also make sure that you're protected. You're doing protections around your light body, you're doing protections around your children, you're calling in the protection of the ancestors. You're constantly staying rooted to the spiritual realm, because everything starts in the spirit realm first. But none of this goes down without the divine feminine protecting her spiritual gifts. Okay. So that's going to be number one. And then one of your spiritual gifts is going to be your energy. Your energy, the time and the expenditure of that, so it's very important to protect that and know when to say no and know when to say yes. And I don't care who it is. It's not being mean, or it's not being a bad person to take care of you. Okay. So very, very important there. And that's something that I've been incorporating, and I love it. And we've been hearing a lot of this on social media, and I approve this message 100%, which is talking about the soft life. Okay. Some of us have never even really had the opportunity to do this. And some of our ancestors as women, didn't never get a chance to do this. Okay, when I think about the life that my grandmother lived, she worked hard. She waited on everybody. I never saw her go do any kind of self-care thing. Okay, she had four children by the time she was 20 years old. Later on in her life, she ended up taking care of my granddad who was ill. She took care of both of her parents, and she really didn't get the opportunity to ever have her life be her life, or even have a piece of her life that was for her. Now, the good thing about that and the happy ending to that story is that she's living with my mom now. So my mom is kind of like waiting on her and spoiling her and doing all of those things for her at this phase in her life, which I think is so beautiful to see. So my grandmother does not have to lift a finger, honey. She don't cook nothing. Well, sometimes she does. She'll go in there and really make something from scratch too, you know. But for the most part, she doesn't have to. And I think that's a beautiful thing that my mother was able to give that to her. And I also think it's a beautiful thing for me to watch and see, and for my girls to watch and see. You know, this is how we start to recorrect and heal that generational trauma and bring it back around full circle so that there's a new type of generation and a way of being and living. The soft life, I'm all about that. Taking time for yourself, self care, rest, all that good jazz. I'm with it, with it. Okay, so another way that you can help to for spiritual protection, since we have to call on the resources for that, because a lot of us don't have that type of protection based on how we've been living, is to call in your feminine lineage. Okay, call in your grandmama, call in your great grandmama, call in the warrior women of your lineage, you know, calling in the goddesses and of your lineage, and calling in the goddesses from different spiritual practices. Okay, so that's going to help you tremendously. Calling on Oshun, calling on Yemaya, calling on whoever resonates with you. Oh, yeah, calling on all different sorts of divine feminine energies that you can call in to help you protect this family, protect me, you know, help me to protect my energy. You know, this is going to help to guide you. That's why I always say, connect with your own ancestors first, because they're going to guide you through this. Okay, but definitely calling in the enforcements when it comes to spiritual protection as well. All right, so I'm going to move on to number three. Number three, to live as a sovereign embodied divine feminine, you want to break generational contracts that keep you small. Okay, I love it. I love it. I love it. And two places we're going to talk about with this is radical self responsibility. I love it. Radical self responsibility, not just no regular self responsibility, because everybody will probably say, I'm responsible, but we talk a radical. Okay, radical, and we're going to get into that. And then also inner child healing. Okay, and I'm going to talk about why we're only talking about inner child healing on this particular episode in just a minute. Okay, so we're breaking generational contracts that keep us small. Same thing as breaking generational trauma. This is going to be a big part of helping you to live as an embodied sovereign. Okay. Um, so a lot of number one, why this is so important, and I think we all know this, particularly as Afro Indigenous people, is we inherited a lot of survival patterns. Okay, so I talked a lot about that in the first two, and at one point they were served as a protection for us. Okay, some of the stuff that our ancestors, living and the ones that came before them, had to go through, protection and survival patterns meant staying alive. Okay, that's what it was. You know, there was things that were going on that if they wanted to be alive, if they wanted their children to live, they had to learn certain survival patterns and techniques. And unintentionally, that was passed down to us in our DNA, in our bloodline. Okay. So we grew up seeing stuff, we grew up hearing stuff, and that became our normal, like we talked about in the beginning of the podcast. Some of the things that we grew up with were silence, don't tell, over giving, over shrinking. A lot of times we saw some of the more elder women in our community really have to give a lot, like I just described with my grandmother. And they didn't really get anything in return as a result of that. Okay. So the times that we're living in now, just even the fact that I'm able to do this and have this podcast where I'm able to talk to divine feminine and talk about embodied, being an embodied sovereign, uh, we're living in a different time. Okay, so survival is not our pattern anymore. And so, in order to do that, we have the ability, we have the opportunity, and most importantly, we have the choice to heal, whatever that means for you. Okay. So, how we're going to embody this is that radical self responsibility, like I was talking about. Name the patterns. Name the patterns that you're keeping alive, and choose to break them. One of the ways that you're going to be able to do this and really recognize this is all the way back to that first thing I talked about when I said sitting with your feelings and your thoughts. Okay. If you sit quiet long enough, then you're going to have old stuff coming up that's like fresh. You're going to be like, why am I still thinking about that? That was the other day. I had a thought about, I don't know what it was. It was something that was old. It was like high school, and it was just a random thing that happened. It wasn't necessarily that bad, but it was like, why am I thinking about that? I like literally had to stop myself and say, why in the world am I thinking about that? And that just lets me know when I do that, that's just stuff in there that's coming to the surface that needs to be moved and processed out. Okay. So just kind of paying attention to see what the patterns are. Name them patterns. What is that pattern? The pattern of being quiet, the pattern of being silent, the pattern of needing validation, the pattern of always trying to be right, the pattern of um, uh, over achieving, but what is that overachieving really? Needing validation from other people. So naming the patterns that you're keeping alive and choosing to break them, making the conscious decision to say, I want to not live that way anymore. Okay. And then calling in the reinforcements, call them ancestors in, burn that candle, pull them herbs out, say, we're getting rid of this, cut them cords, we've got the tools today. So, and we've got the space for it. We're not in survival mode. We're sitting here listening to podcasts and watching YouTube videos, trying to choose to heal. Why? Because we want to break these contracts that keep us small. We want to be all of ourself. We want to be fully expressing as sovereign beings, okay? And in order to do that, we have to get rid of the muck and the survivor patterns that are embedded in our DNA so we can start tapping into what comes from our cosmic lineage, okay? And I just want to take a pause here to say this. I always say start with your bloodline ancestors. And there's a reason for that. Your bloodline ancestors are going to guide you on your journey. I always say that. But essentially, the more you heal, the more you grow. You're going to go further and further back down the ancestral lineage. Okay. So it'll be bloodline lineage, then it'll be ancestors you don't know, you've never heard of, but they walk with you. Some of them will be spirit guides until you move into your cosmic family. Okay. As you move into your cosmic family, you're moving into a higher realm of spiritual consciousness. Okay. So a lot of times I think that people think that working with your bloodline ancestors is small. Okay. Like I want to be somewhere up here with the Lumerian. I want to be with the Syrians, and the bottom line is it's like skipping steps, because most of us that are Afro Indigenous, we have some generational trauma to heal, and that's a big part of if you are the one that's called in your lineage why you're here. Okay, so it's kind of it does a disservice to us to say I'm going to skip them and I'm going to go up here, because at the same time you also haven't elevated spiritually enough. You know what I'm saying? The ones that are way up here high ascended, they're not fooling with you yet. You know what I'm saying? They're like, you got to work your way on up there. I mean, you may be able to have some knowledge and get some access to something, but there's some ashe, there's some energy that must be put into it. And then on top of that, our ancestors help us so much in this life, to be able to heal, to be able to grow, to be able to access what's inside of our DNA. We don't want to leave them hanging. They suffered so that we could be. They suffered and they went through the hard part so that we could be at the part where we don't have survival patterns anymore. So now we get to come consciously into healing. So that's why I always say that. And I have been walking with my high ascended ancestors for quite some time. But my bloodline ancestors, my A1 since day ones, they were there. through the thick and thin, all the way back from the time I was a child and still to this day. So I have interactions, and all that ended up happening is my relationship with my ancestors ended up getting greater and bigger and larger and fuller. Okay. So I still contact and have interactions with my bloodline ancestors as well as my cosmic lineage star family as well. Okay. So that's why I say that, just start there, and you're going to be healing generational trauma, breaking survival patterns along the way, and essentially you will tap into something higher and deeper. Okay. And it helps you, and it helps them. It helps that those that come before us, it helps you, and it helps the ones that come after us. Okay. And that's how it is with the whole ancestral healing and ancestral work and pattern that I'm so passionate about, because it has saved my life and changed my life in so many different ways, and I watch it happen for other people consistently over and over again. Okay. So the second thing I want to talk about is inner child healing. Tend to the younger you who didn't feel safe to be seen, loved, or heard. And I talked about this on another podcast episode as well. Healing that inner child is everything. A lot of that little wounded child who couldn't protect themselves lives in us all. The one who wasn't seen, didn't feel loved, didn't feel good enough, and who knows how it started. Most people's healing journey usually always goes back to childhood, because those are the most foundational years of our lives, and they shape so much of who we become. And you hear people say that, but it's like a blanket statement. And what that actually means is what I talked about at the beginning of this: is it programs us. It's a form of emotional programming. Okay. That we end up creating these survival patterns in order to get along in life. Okay. So healing those inner child wounds is also going to be very, very effective and efficient. Okay. And another way to do that is going all the way back to sitting with your thoughts. You'll be surprised the stuff that comes up. And if you're writing down and naming the patterns, those things are going to help you. So as you can see, being a sovereign being is work. It's still work. It's not a just, I woke up, I watched a video, I did one, I put an altar up, I prayed one time, and now I'm sovereign. I don't care what you see on social media. I'm not going to lead you astray. All right. So I'm always here for those who are interested in really, making some changes in their life, and becoming somebody who's able to live as an embodied sovereign. It's work. That's all I got to say is healing. And of course, I'm going to say it like I say it on every podcast episode. It always starts with healing. Okay. Everything starts with healing. Just like I talked about, starting with the bloodline ancestry and then moving into the cosmic lineage, it's the same thing. Starting with our bloodline ancestry is going to help us with the tremendous amount of healing that's necessary. Healing mostly our foundational stuff first, our inner child healing that were patterns that were passed down to us. Some of them didn't have nothing to do with us, it's just something that we experienced and lived. And then certain things that were passed down, that are in our DNA as well. So we begin that healing process, right? And in that healing process, you begin to elevate, and your frequency changes and attunes, and you become more conscious, and you start to live a certain way, think a certain way, until you continue to elevate and elevate and elevate. And there's no ceiling to this. That's the beautiful part of this. You can't say, okay, well, that's it. I made it as I graduated. No, you're not going to graduate. Okay, I promise you. There's going to be something more magnificent around the corner, but at least you get to get the stuff out of the way. Okay. So, yes, inner child healing, beginning to release those contracts of shame, silence, and fear, and walk in the truth of who you truly are. And a lot of times, I do want to point this out too, as well. This may start out as anger, and I've seen this a lot of times on social media, where people are going in about how they were raised and what happened to them. And I used to this and this happened to me. And you could tell that they're still at a certain part of their healing. Um, not to dismiss that, because that is a part of your healing. It's just a reminder to not get stuck there. You want to get on the other side. You want to get to the point where you are mastering your emotional body so that when these things come up, you're able to speak about it if necessary in an empowered manner. Okay, so yes, this happened to me, but I was able to heal through that. I recognized that my mother was going through what was passed down in her generation, what she was raised from. You know what I'm saying? So you begin to become um, the emotional master, like we talked about, of your life. These things that happen to you, these programs, this shame and silence, they don't move or sway you one way or another. Okay. And then you may be the one, like I said, the first one healing in your family that's able to go back and pass some of that healing to your mom or your dad or whoever the culprit was in that story. Okay. So think about it from that manner. And I get it. Like I said, the whole anger is a part of the healing because I went through that too. I went through that as well. And I'm not there today. And I'm grateful for that because I realized how hanging on to that pain and that anger was actually blocking me from being able to heal into this sovereign embodied divine feminine. All right, so we got two more, y'all. I done got to talking a long time on this one, but that's okay. Create sacred boundaries for your peace and power. Oh, I love that. And you know why? Because I do it. I do it. It's important to understand that boundaries are not walls, they're portals, okay? They are portals to freedom. They really are. They keep your field clean and your soul in integrity. This is real right here. A sovereign woman doesn't leak energy trying to keep the peace. She is the peace, and she guards it like her life depends on it because it does. Ooh, let me tell you something. I don't play about my peace. I do not play about my peace, okay? I love um the life that I live today. Okay. Today, my house is clean. I had to do my spiritual cleansing. You know what I'm saying? I have to do my spiritual protections. I had to change out some herbs on some mojo bags. I was doing all of these different things. And my house is quiet. It's peaceful. I got the cat on the patio. She was even disrupting my peace earlier today. I was like, you got to get out here, honey. You messing with the peace. Okay. Peace is so precious, and we have to make sure that we are eradicating anything that it gets in the way of the peace. Why do I like my peace? Another reason is because I can hear. I can hear. I can hear the messages. I can hear the downloads, because I live this way on a daily basis. This has just become a way of life for me. So I know I'm like, okay, I got to get my floors. I got to do some root work. I got to cleanse and clear the energy of my home. I have to get any stagnant energy out. I have to cleanse my spiritual body, a spiritual cleansing. All of these things help me to protect my energy, protect my spiritual gifts, be able to continue to have peace. Like all of these start running in alignment. Allow me to have emotional mastery, allow me to have better discernment because I'm in alignment with whatever my soul's purpose is. Okay. So very, very important to understand that we have got to be careful about who is around us. Period. Okay, be careful about who's around you and who's trying to steal your peace. Okay, and then pay attention to that. And then how can you pay attention to that? If you're further along on the journey, you know how. Okay, but if you're in the beginning, we're gonna go all the way back to the beginning of what I talked about is to come back to your body. What is your body telling you? What is your body telling you? What is your gut telling you? What is your intuition telling you? How are you feeling around this person? What type of thoughts are popping up when this person's around? Is it like, I got to go? It's like you doing too much. I'm sorry. I got to get off this phone. This is what we're talking about. Protecting your peace at all costs because anything that drains you it's going back to that discernment that we talked about, where we're talking about people just taking away your energy, your spiritual gifts, and it's just not good. So what do you need to do? Cut cords and reclaim your energy. Okay. So sometimes people slip in, don't get me wrong. Like I've had that happen where I pick up the phone and I'm like, all of a sudden this person's on one and they're draining me. I gotta go. Now what? They done depleted a little bit of my energy. I gotta reclaim that energy back. So how do I call my power back to me? I call all my power back to me. Anybody that's taking my power, these different things that I've learned to say. I call my power back to me from any person, place, thing, or entity that has taken my energy without my permission, consent, acknowledgement, all of these different things that I do. I call it all back. I can visualize it coming back, and any kind of seep leaks, we tight tape them up and close them up. I get my warrior ancestors back around the portals and protections. Like, I don't play. I'm gonna reclaim my energy. Okay, so that's gonna be a very, very huge one here to making sure that we have sacred boundaries. Okay, if you got somebody that's always a taker, energy vampire, know when to say no. And that's actually the second thing I was going to talk about is learn to say no with love and yes with intention. Okay. Um, we don't have to get mad and tell somebody no. You can be just as calm and peaceful as possible and say, no, that's not going to work for me, or no, I don't want to do that, and you can say yes and stand behind your yes with love and intention. Yes, I'm going to do this because XYZ. So very, very important. Like that right there is a superpower for a lot of people. Just being able to say no, because you'll see how much that ties into the programming of wanting to be a people pleaser. Simple as that. So yep, we talked about that, and now we're on to our fifth one. Live as the living altar. Align with your ancestors and your purpose. You are not here just for a cute vibe. You're here on assignment. It's like my ancestors say to me all the time. They be like, vacation over. Okay, we're not down here on vacation. We're here because there's a purpose, there's an assignment, and I remember that too because I was chillaxing for a while, and they were like, okay, get up, like it's time to start doing this work. And I really had to like dive back into it. I had gotten a little complacent at a certain point in time. Okay. So, living sovereignty means sovereignly living in alignment with your higher self and with the legacy you're co-creating. Okay, you're the bridge between what was and what will be. Everything you heal now ripples forwards and backwards through the lineage. Okay, we talked about that already, and that's just the bottom line. We're here co-creating with our ancestors a new legacy for a new generation. Okay, we're here creating new patterns. And not to mention, if you're here right now, we're here at a pivotal point in time because we're no longer in survival mode. We have the ability to start healing. We're tapping into our traditional cultures and practices and belief sets, and we have the ability to teach this to our children and our children's children. So our grandchildren, for some of us, they won't know anything about the whole survival life. All they're going to know is the new way. All they're going to know is the new way. So that's radical self responsibility and radical responsibility to know that, hey, I got to make sure that I'm protecting my spirit body. I'm protecting my energy. I'm protecting my boundaries. I'm protecting my peace. I'm being in emotional mastery. All of these different things. Why? These little babies are watching you. Your children are watching you. Okay. So it's very, very important that we start to actually incorporate this in our life. It's not just something that I'm saying or a podcast episode, but this is our assignment as well as legacy that we're creating. We're co creating with the ancestors. Okay. So, ways that we can live as the living altar and align with our ancestors and purpose is going to be create or tend your ancestor altar. Now, I actually have a book on how to create your ancestor altar. You can check it out on holisticandspiritualaf.com. That'll show you how, like as a beginner, to set up your altar with very basic, simple things. It doesn't have to be like super advanced, to start out with. As you start working with your ancestors, then more things will be added to your altar. But creating and tending that ancestor altar is just going to help you to make that connection with your ancestors, that initial connection, and begin to start to allow them to guide you and work in your life as you begin to move towards your assignment, soul alignment, what your purpose is, co creating legacy for the new generation. So that's one way you can definitely get started with that. And then ask them, does this version of me honor the ones who came before me? Chances are, if you're talking to them and you hadn't been talking to them in a while, they're gonna be like, yes, like, thank God you're talking to us. A lot of us have gone our entire lives without talking to our ancestors. We may have remembered them. We may have talked about them, which is good as well, because that helps to lift them up and raise them up as well. But the more consistently that we work with our ancestors, the stronger the connection will be, and the more open the portal will become for them to help you. You'll see them being able to help you in a variety of different ways, as well as their eagerness to want to help you. They want to help you to make it easier. They want to help you to be in soul alignment so that you can be an embodied sovereign. Okay. Also, tune into your soul's purpose, not the one capitalism told you to chase. I heard that, but the one your spirit whispered to you in the quiet. That's huge, okay? Because a lot of times we can easily get caught up into what it is that we do and like how many degrees we have and where we work and how much money we're making. And those things are just things. I'm just going to keep it as that. And I know at one point I was that way too, because capitalism and colonization and a patriarchal society will let you think that that is your worth. When the bottom line is we're all individual souls. And if we've never tapped into this part of ourselves and our being and who we are, never even really asked ourselves that, how do we even know that the job we're working is in alignment? Most of us are just doing what we got to do to pay bills. A lot of people, the majority of people that work can't stand their job. Why is that? Because it's out of soul alignment. And I've been there before. I've been there before. I've had to change jobs that were completely draining and depleting and leaving no energy for me to kind of do my spiritual stuff at all. I've left jobs like that. I actually left a job, and it was very scary. I remember this too because this was about 2 years ago, and there was a lot of ringing in my ear. I'm talking about like nonstop ringing all day, almost kind of annoying. And I was going through a major transformation and frequency shift, and so was the planet and everybody on it. And I remember hearing very vividly, and I hated this job too. Oh my God, it stressed me the hell out. And I remember hearing very vividly my ancestors saying to me, you got to leave this job now or you're going to miss the window. They said it just like that. They sometimes they not a lot of words. They're not finna explain it to you like I'm doing, but they were just like, you got to leave now or you're going to miss the window. And guess what? My body told me, you got to get out of here because something big is happening. That's all I knew. I was like, you something transformation is coming. You gonna miss it. You ain't gonna be able to do it in here. I remember I wrestled around with that for about another week, and then I walked out of the job. I left the job, and I didn't know what I was going to do, what was going to happen next. But I threw myself back into my spiritual practices and started cleansing and clearing and doing the stuff that I know to do back to the basics. And I started fortifying and my spiritual body. From the inside out. Okay. I started really taking care of that spiritual realm as a divine feminine, and I was able to manifest something else that was more in alignment that allowed me to continue my spiritual practices. And so because I'm in tune to those things, because I live this way. Now, granted, I've been living this way for a long time now, so I wouldn't expect somebody that's just starting out to like be able to like snap into it. But I will say this, the veil has thinned tremendously now that we're into the age of Aquarius and we're raising from third density to fifth density. So it can happen faster for you. That I can say. You don't have to go to whole 21 and be an OG, and by the time you get it, they talk about now you're in elder training. So I'm like, elder training. I'm like, what? I didn't even get a chance to be young. That was the whole thing. So with you guys that are like up under this umbrella of the veil being lifted, you can rapidly have some transformation. Timelines are merging and everything. That's the exciting part about it. Time is speeding up for a lot of people. But yet at the same time, we looking younger. I love it. I love that part. So definitely don't feel like you're behind. You're right where you're supposed to be. My suggestion suggestion would be to just definitely connect with your bloodline ancestors. Start with the altar if you need to, and then begin to start to get quiet. Don't think that just because you put an altar up, that's all you got to do. You ain't got to do no work. That ain't. It's a co-creation. Just keep that in mind. Okay, we're co-creating with our ancestors. They can only guide us and give us inspiration and wisdom. We have to do the physical work part here in order to do our part. Okay, so definitely, I would say set that altar up. Go ahead and start getting quiet with yourself. Getting quiet with yourself to hear these thoughts is going to open up a whole Pandora's box for you. So you're going to be able to hear these thoughts. You're going to be able to hear these patterns. You're going to be able to write those down. You're going to be able to ask your ancestors to help you with that. You're going to be able to slowly begin to heal these things. That's going to help you to have more emotional mastery over the things and the thoughts that come up. So no longer are you pulled and swayed in 50 different directions in 2 minutes. You're going to learn to trust your body, your gut, your intuition when it's telling you that this is not good or that's not good. You'll have the discernment to know what's a yes and what's a no, all based on what's going on inside of you simultaneously. Okay, as you're doing this, you'll receive more downloads and transmissions. You'll know who to say no to. You'll start cutting certain people off. Okay, people, places, and things. You'll be cutting cords like crazy. Okay, because you'll realize that this is not in alignment. And as you continue to grow, transform, and evolve, certain people, places, and things will no longer be in alignment with your soul because you'll be doing work that other people are not. And sometimes you'll just have to bid them farewell and recognize that the soul contract has been completed. It's not a bad thing. It's not, you may have a little bit of a grief session depending on what type of relationship y'all had, but it's just a part of it, and as you do that, you will begin to meet people who are aligned. You will start to all of a sudden have a new circle of people because you have raised your frequency to a certain level. So yeah, so all of those things, as you can see, they interact with each other. I'm going to run through them one more time. The 5 ways to live as a sovereign being, coming home to your body. We talked about that. Activate the divine feminine within, being committed to your truth. Oh my goodness, speak your truth without apology. And spiritual protection. We talked about that a tremendous amount. We also talked about calling in your feminine lineage, calling in the reinforcements. That's what I call them. Okay. And for some of you who may not know or have a strong connection with the current ancestors of your bloodline, it is okay to use community ancestors. Okay, so Harriet Tubman, Madam C.J. Walker, Afeni Shakur, whomever resonates with you, those community ancestors can also be used to assist you while you begin the process of connecting with your own bloodline ancestors. Breaking generational contracts, curses, healing generational trauma, all the same thing. Radical self responsibility, and naming the patterns that keep naming the patterns you're keeping alive and choosing to break them. Inner child healing, we talked about that. 4 was sacred boundaries for your peace and power. We talked about saying no, 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 no. And we talked about energy sovereignty. Pay attention to who's draining in you and who nourishes you. Don't forget about that too. Who makes you feel good? Like what types of spaces and places make you feel like, yeah, I like being here. I like being around that. Okay, know when to cut cords and reclaim your energy. That's a big one right there, because a lot of times people will pull from you. Don't forget to refill up and reclaim that energy back. Okay, and living as the living altar was number 5. Align with your ancestors and your purpose. Okay, creating the altar like we talked about, and honoring the version of yourself that you're growing into and your purpose. Okay. All right. So that was loaded. I didn't expect for that to be that big and that long, but those were my transmissions and my downloads for today. I hope somebody got something out of that. Once again, if you guys want to check out the book on how to create your altar, you can check that out at holisticandspiritualaf.com. Be sure to follow me on social media at holisticandspiritualaf.com. Oh, excuse me, AF. And then, of course, be sure to hit that follow, like, subscribe. And this podcast is on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere podcasts are listed. All right, guys, that is it for this episode. Until the next one, peace.